Yaelokre has always been a fascinating corner of the internet for me. Who would have thought that behind their music all this time there was an entire hidden world full of characters and lore that over the past year has grown into something bigger and more captivating, but also more complex. So, if you're already here, why not let me help you make sense of it, introducing you to this wondrous world if you're new here, or uncovering something new if you've been around for a while. Either way, I suggest you get ready, because today we are diving back into the mysterious world of Yaelokre. So, welcome to Eld, the Earth of Lark, where all of today's events take place. A fairy tale-like place with its own rules, hiding a small town called Felicity. This is where live the Lark, along with some new characters we are about to discuss, but before that I should clarify two things. Firstly, today we will be focusing only on the characters, their lore and songs, while the conversation about the lore of the world will be next time. And second, this video will only cover the new lore that appeared over the past year. I've already talked about Yaelokre on this channel before, and honestly, I don't see the point in once again explaining who the Lark are, who the Larkers are, and so on. However, since some of the information from back then is outdated now, I will have to correct some things today as we go along. But we will get to that later, because right now, Cooper and the Playwright, new characters of Eld. Unfortunately, we won't be spending too much time on them. Even though they've been around for over a year now, there's still surprisingly little information about them. And while Cooper, as I know, does have their own song, just like all the Larks, it hasn't been released yet, and my rule of don't discuss unreleased content still stands. So, Cooper and the Playwright are both caretakers of the Lark. While the Playwright more of a teacher to the Lark and focuses on practicality, Cooper is, well, more about fun, so it's kind of obvious why the Lark tend to listen to Cooper more often, especially Clementine. If we talk about the Playwright in a bit more detail, they are not only the Lark's teacher, but also the one who writes their plays. The name kind of speaks for itself. So yeah, they helped write Hayfields and the origin song for each of the Lark. Their second name is Quest, and if you ever wondered who was writing those messages in Yaelokre's Insta channel, that was them. In the past they were a maestro, and now in their early 30s they are happily married to Cooper. I hope they are married. I have already been wrong on this topic twice in the previous video, and please, I really don't want to be wrong a third time. Anyway, since we mentioned Cooper, let's talk about them too. Cooper Caligayahan is the so-called Knight of Felicity, so-called because of Clementine, who mistook them for a knight even though they are not really one. But even if they don't, Cooper still goes along with the idea. That alone is enough to impress Clem, and they still look up to Cooper. They are always ready to help the townsfolk with anything they are asked for, from something as simple as helping an elderly woman cross the street, to more serious things like fighting bandits, even though Cooper doesn't really like associating themselves with violence or anything that can be perceived as bad. Still, their help is often necessary, so to distance themselves from this, they wear a hooded mask. Cooper had a rather unusual childhood. They weren't raised by their biological parents, they were raised by a community of adults, and Bertram, a former Knight of Felicity, was one of their main caretakers. And interestingly enough, the Lark are actually in a very similar situation. And with that, we've covered the new characters. Well, the main new characters. There are also other characters in this world known as the Felicity Cast. This group includes Bean, Santelia, Pietro, Palad and Antonia. They are characters who sometimes help look after the Lark and are friends of Cooper and the Playwright. However, these characters were written by friends of Kizosk, not by Kizosk themselves, so they do exist in this world, but each of them has their own personal lore that doesn't really connect to Middle Arc. Because of that, they aren't fully canon to Eld's story, but still, they do exist here, so I think it's worth talking about at least one of them. Bin, a character created by Kizosk partner Wren, and out of all other characters, they are the only one at least knows something about. The postman of Felicity, they appeared in the Kid and Leveret trailer where they were delivering letters to the upcoming show. Because of their job, almost everyone in Felicity knows them in one way or another. Every time Bin rides their bike through town, someone always greets them and they greet everyone back just as warmly. But surprisingly though, when it comes to the Lark, they seem much more awkward. Like they are trying to fit in or maybe look cool. Maybe there's something more to that. I don't know. And now, I think it's time to talk about what most of you are probably the most excited to hear about. Since my last video, all of the Larks' origin songs have finally been released. We got 2 new songs for Cole and Clementine, Kid and Leveret and Cole's Response, which reveal even more lore about these two. We also received Peregrine's Douse scalded and Kingsley's Kamahalan, and today we'll breaking down almost all of them. So, why don't we start from the beginning? This is a story about 2 children, one who hid to be heard and another who ran to be remembered. Kid and Leveret tells us about the past of Cole and Clementine. It feels rather strange to say this line for the second time, but yeah, last time I already talked about my farewells to the fields and Birdcage Blue and Yellow, which also explored the past of these two, and yes, we are talking about them again. Though it might be more accurate to say that we are adding to their lore, since Kid and Leveret essentially tells the same story, just in a much deeper and clearer way. So, let's start with Cole. Overall, their lore stayed mostly the same as I described it last time, but now that we know a lot more about them, quite a few parts of my previous explanation need correcting, so let's do exactly that. In the previous video I told you that chaos once fell upon the hills where Cole used to live, and that Cole supposedly witnessed this disaster and hid from it. And while this so-called chaos did happen, I originally thought it occurred during Cole's lifetime, but turns out I miscalculated a bit. By a few centuries. Yeah, so no, Cole obviously didn't witness it. Okay, so what actually happened? What was this chaos? At the time, a rather foolish guy named Majesty chose to ignore the warnings of the Harkers. Because of this ignorance, a tragedy occurred, ones we didn't know about before. But now, thanks to not only Kid and Leveret, we know that the Groves bellowed over his kingdom and his people, leaving only a hamlet and the wails of yore. Years passed, centuries passed. That hamlet still stood in place, but it was long forgotten and almost no one lived there anymore. Almost no one except, as it turns out, Cole. And unexpectedly, Kingsley? Why was Kingsley there? That's a conversation for another time. For now, all we know is that they practically grew up with each other, so it explains why they were here. As for Cole, their situation is described like this. Found in forgotten fields of Flaxen, I was the Leveret in hiding, rowdy and rigorous they rive and rally there, where the houses once stood. For me, this line immediately reveals a lot of things I didn't fully understand when I first analyzed my farewells to the fields. They've forgotten, people forgot about the hills, a god-forsaken settlement in a place where tragedy once consumed the kingdom. I do not want to see, I could hear, and that's enough, the clashing of the horse, hoof by hoof, horn by horn. Since this place was long ago abandoned, it makes sense that some not very good people started coming here from time to time, and Cole, who it turns out was living there, hid. They were panicked and unaware of what was happening outside. They didn't want to see it, but they couldn't avoid hearing it. Life there was, to put it mildly, terrible, but we already know that at some point Cole managed to leave the hills. How did that happen? This is where it's time to remember the Songs of Origin trailer. If you don't recall, when I analyzed it last time, I was confused by its very first line. Remained a scarecrow, a hen and a leveret. Back then I said that the scarecrow was the storyteller, the leveret was Cole, but I couldn't quite figure out who the hen was. Somehow I came to the conclusion that it must have been Cole's mother. And so why am I bringing this up again? Because recently this character has actually been revealed to us. I was kind of right about her being Cole's mother, but not entirely. To start with, this might not seem that important, but it's still something that needs to be said. Long story short, back when I was writing the script, when I was talking about the hen, I took her for like actual hen, not like the chicken, but like a feathered lady, if you please. And then I just went like, well, in Middle-earth only the Lark are people anyway. And well, that's no longer true, I guess. It's like the opposite now. Everyone in this world is human except like the Harkers, so the hen obviously is human too. She's probably called like that because of her appearance. And as for the identity of the so-called hen herself, at the time Yaelokre held quite a few Twitter spaces where they shared bits of Middle-earth's lore and interesting facts about it, and there they talked about a character named Henrietta, the feathered lady from Hidden Leveret and My Farewells to the Fields, and they were a caretaker of Cole. And you guessed it right, this Henrietta is that hen we spent so long scratching our heads over. She is the one who spoke with the storyteller in the trailer, the one who found Cole, took them away from the hills, and the one Cole lives to this day. And now Cole's origin finally feels complete. We finally know more about what happened to the hills and who Henrietta was, and that's, I think, everything that needs correcting about Cole. Thank goodness, it all finally makes sense. Hidden Leveret, along with a few lore drops, cleared up so many things that were confusing to me before, and now I'm much more confident that Cole's origin was exactly like that. Well, and that's we've only discussed part of Cole's origin. Next up is Clément Dearworth, the one who ran to be remembered. Clément's situation today is a bit simpler. This time I won't be correcting anything, instead I'm about to reveal a lot of new lore. The Baroness, or more precisely Enaїs, Clément's mother, was overprotective. She loved Clementine, but she was also very controlling and never gave them the freedom they longed for. It even went as far as not letting them go outside, because supposedly they don't need to go out. The sky, the forest, all of that can be seen at home. Their house was painted in such a way that the ceiling looked like the sky. The bedrooms were painted as if they contained castles, gardens, entire kingdoms, but it hadn't been perfect for a long time. The paintings were scratched or faded, the wallpaper worn down, because none of it had ever been created for Clément. They were painted by Enaïs' father for her, his daughter, when she was still growing up. And even if those pictures might have been perfect, Clément had seen the outside world and wanted to feel it, rather than look at the fake pictures and remain locked inside the walls of their house. And this could have gone on and on until one day Clément realized that they couldn't live like that. After convincing Enaïs that they won't go far, they promise, they left their home, but the moment they stepped beyond the fence, Enaïs never saw Clément again. That was when Clément finally felt as though they had awakened, no longer are they puppeted, and judging by the song's lyrics, that resentment toward Enaïs still lingers for not seeing them at their brightest, though in truth it wasn't entirely Enaïs' fault that she wasn't the best mother to Clément. It's just, how will she know how to be a good parent if she herself didn't have that kind of thing growing up? Her father, the baron named Ernest, was a doll maker. He had an immense capacity for love, but not for himself or others, only for his work. He devoted himself entirely to it, loved bringing joy to people, especially children, but none of that love was left for his wife or for Enaïs, his daughter. His wife understood this, and so someday they divorced. Enaïs stayed with Ernest because due to his status he could provide her with everything she needed, unlike her mother, who was just a normal lady who didn't have a lot. But that still didn't make him a good father. He never realized that he loved his work more than his own child. Enaïs realized that if she wanted to have at least some bond with her father, it had to be through his work, so she began learning it. He taught her everything he knew, and eventually Enaïs grew into a master just as skilled and talented as he was, in some ways even surpassing him, and yet Ernest still never truly acknowledged her as his daughter. So it all felt pointless. Years passed. Ernest eventually left this Lark's world and Enaїs had Clément, and whether because she had never had a proper parent or because she desperately wanted to teach Clément everything she knew herself, she began to overprotect them, to control them, and as we know now, all of this sadly ended badly for both of them. The misunderstanding that was supposed to be a light mistake, but it became something more. After Clément left their home, and because they were, in a way, literally outside for the very first time, they accidentally ended up falling off a cliff into a lake. That's when Cole found them, together with Peregrine and Kingsley. When Clément entered their lives, they knew nothing except how to love, so the kids had to teach them how the world actually works. Like, even very basic things such as how to cross the road. But in return, Clément taught the other Lark members how to love and be kind. And fun fact, this is actually exactly what connects the Lark and makes them so inseparable. They are always learning from each other. But we'll get into that in more detail another time. Clément felt the most comfortable around Cole since they were, in a way, the first person Clément met aside of their mother, so they naturally grew attached to each other. Cole was observant and tried to remember proper manners, while Clémentine was always curious. Whenever Clémentine got interested in something, Cole would share whatever small bit of information they knew. Well, as you can imagine, for an 11-year-old child, yeah, it didn't always work out, but hey, they at least tried. Because of that, they developed this really interesting dynamic that probably draws them to each other in the first place. It's kind of funny how I barely started talking about the Lark and already switched back to these two. But like, sorry, there's just way too much information about them that I have to tell you. And honestly, I will still have plenty of time to talk about Peregrine and especially Kingsley later on, so it doesn't matter, does it? Cole's Response, the next song about Cole and Clementine, actually isn't something about lore at all. It's more about feelings that can't really be labeled, but it's also not really a love song, so yeah, what I said in my previous video about Cole and Clément dating was a little wrong. Their relationships can't really be defined in any clear way. First of all, they are about 10-11 years old. What kind of dating are we even talking about here? And second, this song isn't really about Cole and Clementine in the first place. Let me remind you that the entire world of Middle-earth is, in a way, Keith's diary, presented as a story. Everything in it connects to them personally in one way or another. Because of that, Cole's response tells us more about what Keith Osk themselves were feeling at a certain point of their life. They shared this during one of their streams. At the time, they didn't understand the difference between platonic and romantic love. They had so much love for everyone, so many emotions and feelings that were hard for them to name. And when this song was first written, Keith felt pressured because they didn't know how to name those feelings. But when they returned to the song later in life, they realized that maybe those feelings themselves were the answer. That's when they gave the song to their characters who represent them in a past and future way. Cole is the one who they think they are, and Clementine being the person who they want to become. It's kind of self-love, a quiet reassurance they give to themselves that it doesn't matter. Call them whatever you want, understand it however you want, but the truth is, it doesn't matter. Whether they are platonic, whether they are romantic, they feel love, they feel endearment, they feel fondness, and that's enough actually. And that's exactly what Cole sings about in this song. They sing about what they feel, about how they feel almost guilty for those feelings, but Clementine interrupts them, making it clear that it's okay, saying that's never up to me, silly. And then, in the song, realization finally reaches Cole, just like it once reached Keith. They don't need to be ashamed of these feelings or try to explain them in any way. As Cole said themselves, let it be, because in the end, it doesn't matter, does it? Alright, okay, that's enough of Cole and Clementine for now. They've already taken up more than half of the video as it is. Okay, now it's time to talk about Peregrine and their song To Douse's Scalded Tongue. And oh, this already brings back memories of the time when I tried to figure out Cole's origin when we only had one song to work with. I had no idea what was going on in short. Well, at first glance, Even though we can't break down their origin in as much detail as Cole's and Clementine's, but still, I think Peregrine's song reveals quite a lot about what their life was like before the Lark. Peregrine's song is about being forced to grow up too early, about running into a rotten system, and about other people choosing to stay silent about its problems. They felt like they were standing on top of mildewy timbers that somehow still held things up, even though Peregrine themselves knew the collapse was inevitable. They lived in an environment where problems were ignored, and that frustrated them deeply, which you can hear later in the song. The line "Dare me to flood what is already drowning" feels to me like it's full of irritation toward pointless performative actions that no longer mean anything because the damage has already been done. Later, when Peregrine says "shoot him whose heart you can already see," I want to suggest that this might be about their father. I say this with uncertainty because there's no direct confirmation, but I think it's possible. In other songs from the Origin CP, a parental figure is almost always mentioned in some way, and I'll also remind you of that Yaelokre tweet. If he or she gets mentioned, that is specifically for another character, most likely a parent. So for now, this is just a small theory. I wouldn't say it massively affects the lore, but it's something I'm personally sticking with. That line I mentioned earlier sounds to me like an accusation toward people who, instead of addressing problems, drag others down with them, especially those who are too soft to survive that kind of pressure. If this line really is about Peregrine's father, then we can see him as someone kind, whose heart is already seen, but that very environment is what breaks people like him, and that's exactly what Peregrine is complaining about. The next figure mentioned in the lyrics, however, is different. The line "she who refused to peek through the curtains" feels like a judgment, not of strangers, but of their own mother, who seems unwilling to acknowledge what is happening at all. And the final line of this passage, "and children are angry as they should be," feels like Peregrine is speaking not just for themselves, but for all children who grew up in similar environments. As kids have said themselves, children understand far more than we tend to think, and that explains exactly why they sound so angry in this song. Even they understand what is going on, and what frustrates them is the stupidity of the adults who actually have the power to change things, yet seem to deliberately do nothing. Glory thy stillness, a mistaken verse by disfavored ones like them. A verse that may once have been honored, but now is used as an excuse for inaction. And sadly, this environment couldn't affect Peregrine themselves as well. To douse's scalded tongue, the line that is also the song's title, tells me that this isn't the first time they've been silenced, as if their tongue was scalded just to make them shut up, and they are tired of it, they don't want to be muted again. From faults, favors, failures, and the truths, a continuous cycle of personal and collective flaws that love might seem capable of fixing, but love alone isn't enough. Peregrine was raised with the expectation to always be grateful, to the point where negative emotions started to feel wrong, like a sign of disobedience, even though that kind of imperfection is actually something natural. So, to douse's scalded tongue teaches us that you can only grow and become better when you allow it yourself. You have to use your voice to stand up for what is right. And because of that, later on when the Lark entered their life, it finally allowed them to experience what it means to be a child, to change, to open up, since Peregrine were quite closed off around the Lark at first, and to simply live without the weight of others' expectations. And yeah, that's about it. I wish I could add something about what actually pushed Peregrine to leave the place they lived in and stuff like that, but well, yeah, it would be nice if we had at least something more to work with besides the song. The only lead I had was this really old short on the Yaelokre channel where they, in the role of the storyteller, talked about some tale that really reminded me of Peregrine. Or, well, so I thought, until I realized I completely mixed everything up and that story has nothing to do with them at all. So yeah, I guess we'll just move on and talk about how they met Cole and Kingsley, since we are kind of out of topics here. at some point they meet Cole and Kingsley. As I said earlier, the environment Peregrine grew up in couldn't help but affect them in some way. So when our then duo of Lark met Peregrine, they were very closed off. Growing up mostly around adults made them that way, and that was something Kingsley noticed right away. They were the ones who encouraged Peregrine to have fun now, worry later, and just be a kid. Cole eventually picked up on that too and encouraged Peregrine to talk about their feelings as much as a child can understand those feelings. Both of them were essential to Peregrine's growth. So yeah, that's all I can say about Peregrine. I think you are probably expecting me to start talking about Kingsley and their song Kamahalan now, but you know what, I probably have to push that whole discussion to the next video. Don't hit me, I get it, if I'm already breaking down the Lark's origins, then logically I should cover Kingsley's too. But hear me out. I genuinely plan to talk about them today, but once I actually sat down to analyze their lore, I just started firing theory after theory, and the thing is, to really break down Kingsley's origin properly, I feel like I need to add a lot more context about the world of Eld itself, and on top of that, the conversation about Kingsley alone will be just as long as the one about Peregrine, if not longer. And this video is already... yeah, you can see how long it got, and I'm honestly not sure I want to stretch it even farther, so here we are. Anyway, in this video I introduced you to all their characters and told about their origins. In the next one we'll be focusing much more on the world itself, the hierarchies, the characters' interaction with each other. We'll talk a bit more about the Hayfields EP again, and I'll also introduce you properly to the Majesty, because even though I didn't give him that much attention today, they are a very important and inseparable part of Middle-Lark's lore. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed today's deep dive into Yaelokre's lore. Oh, by the way, this isn't really related to the topic, but you might not have noticed while watching this video, but I have my own persona now. I've always wanted to do something like this for a very long time, because it makes making videos way easier, and also, you know, it's just cool when your channel has at least something that represents it and not just a voice, I don't know. The only downside is that I dumped way too much time into it. That's kinda one of the reasons why there were no videos for so long. But I finally finished it, and honestly, I think it turned out pretty fine. Coming back to Yaelokre, if I'm being honest, I personally see a huge amount of progress compared to last year. There's genuinely a lot more lore now, and breaking it down was way more interesting than the last time. I really hope it was just as interesting for you. Like I said, in the next video we won't be just analyzing characters anymore, we'll be fully diving into the lore of this world, which I think you'll enjoy even more, and honestly I'm already really looking forward to the moment when I can properly introduce you to it. And in the meantime, to make the wait for the next part a little easier, you can check out my previous video about Yaelokre. Some of the information there might not have fully stood the test of time, but there's still a lot of interesting stuff in it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.